And then we have the development of the servicing market, which is closely related to the development of NPLs. The NPL market can't be independent on a vibrant can be independent from a vibrant NPL market. We acquired the platform from Monte dei Paschi di Siena. The operation has already been agreed on and signed together with Cerved, and this is a great opportunity for the market. It's a creation of a new subject, of a new figure, and I hope it will make a major contribution to revitalizing the servicing market further. Do you think that Atlas will be needed in the future, considering the stage that the market has come to? In the end, we say perhaps the market might be able to continue to work single-handed. Well, Atlas started as a market operator with a social objective. The two things are not contradictory, mutually contradictory. They don't contradict each other. We want to support the growth of this market and to favor its unlocking in a way. And this happened, and it is happening now, and therefore we are not pursuing only a social mandate, of course. Our ambition is that of getting involved in other activities in the NPL market with an exclusively market focus. What characterized our activity this year with NPLs was the following. There wasn't a big opportunity to choose amongst different purchasing prices or within a specific purchasing perimeter. You can't say, I want this piece of it and not this other. The price is a reverse function of capital, the capital that the bank needs in order to get out of a critical situation. These are the most important variables for an investor. I must identify an object and understand what is the price that I will be able to pay for it. I think that the result was quite good. Without constraints, we can do better than that, however, and we can get involved in operations that are even more interesting for our investors. You have mentioned the conditions that led you to acquire NPLs of Monte dei Paschi. You acquired them en bloc, so to say. The question is, how are you going to sell them? How are you going to release them on the market progressively? What about the subsequent stage in your work? It's not a question of reselling them, of selling them. We have to collect credits from the debtors. We are not simply selling, we're not about going to sell pieces of them. The investment includes two steps. First of all, an analysis, and then the portfolio purchasing, and then the collection of the money you are owned with the redemption of the different quotas. Are you still promising a return of 6% as you did when you entered the market, when you got to the market with Atlas? I think that the yield rates are much higher than 6%, and I think that one might think of a double-digit return if things go very well, or one-digit figure of some 8% if things go fairly well, or if things don't go so well, the figure might be lower. But the yields can't and shouldn't be determined by the investor's promises. On the market, you should have a free flow of supply and demand so that you can have the formation of a correct price. For the banks, how do you see this current moment? It's just a question of jumbo deals that were concluded this year, or do you think that something structural was changed? Well, the jumbo deals did happen, were indeed concluded, and I think they will be concluded in this short period of time that separates us from the end of the year, in order to get to the figures that were mentioned this morning, 100 billion euros. Well, that was the same question, the same reaction I had when the figures were shown to me. Based on the information we have, we think that these 100 billion can be an objective. Maybe we get to 80, but you shouldn't think that we conclude the year with 50 billion. That is not the case. So these are the figures. And then the question concerned a possible turning point on the market. If you remember that well, if you can remember that, some years ago, when NPLs were so heavy in banks' balance sheet that they questioned the very survival of the system. When you remember, I wonder whether you can remember that, but anyway, in the international press, they had printed these news, so much so that it almost became a self-fulfilling prophecy. With 90 billion net doubtful debts, we couldn't imagine the future. We weren't able to imagine the future. They asked Draghi whether NPLs in Italy represented a systemic risk for Europe. They would ask that question of Mr. Draghi continuously. We in Italy, we've always had a different point of view of the situation, a more positive point of view of the situation, a more positive opinion. What is happening today is quite the opposite. What is happening now is that just because of a few jumbo deals, and we know they just concluded two of them, two or three, I would say two, now we have a collapse of in the number of gross doubtful debts that again hit the headlines at an international level. Per se, we might say that the situation wasn't tragic some time ago. Now it has improved, but it's not a Copernican revolution, we might say. Anyway, the Italian banks that a couple of years ago had 30 or 40% of their net assets in the stock exchange, well, they have recovered vis-à-vis minimum prices in the stock exchange, which means that international investors are looking at Italian banks with a different opinion, in a different way, from a different point of view. We heard the opinions of some extremely authoritative operators that work in Europe in the field of surveillance, and I had a feeling that they were particularly harsh with regard to their approach to deteriorated debts from a regulatory point of view. But if values change, if the reading of those values improves, these institutions too, will have a yield that will be slightly higher than the important value. The most important value is time. So what I mean that the pressure on the part of regulatory institutions to do everything in a haste and to sell tomorrow, I think that that pressure will be reduced. Processes have gone on. Some people have sold their assets, others are anyway contributing to the improvement of the management. We were joking with a few friends and we said by the end of the year also Italian newspapers will say that the problem of NPLs has been solved. Am I overly optimistic? Well, let's see. We shall see whether I am or not. Of course, the whole problem is not over. There are other things to do. Mr. Bandelli, what about this pressure on time? What are the signals you receive from regulatory institutions? What about your plan? Have you received an answer? What is happening?
Well, about the timing, I think what Giovanni Bossi has said can be fully shared. If you take the guidelines and you read the first lines, it says deliberate sustainable reduction. It doesn't say immediate, sustainable reduction, which cannot be 40% in 2 years of all the NPLs you've got in your portfolio. So like all bankers, we want to have some flexibility margins. If the objective, if the target is 20, this is different from a particularly difficult target that requires the transactions that can be harmful for my financial situation and for the shareholders. Then we have to say that with the ECB has played a very important role. Its actions have produced a result in the right direction. The factor of defining objectives for the staff, we have a very large workforce. The CEO a few years ago did not establish any dialogue with its staff. The worker unit depends on me. I check the performances with together with the worker unit director. I think what you're saying is very interesting. So the question is, how do you structure a workout unit, starting up from different situations? Because some banks are buying and others are selling credit. How do you organize a workout unit, very briefly? Just to finish what I was saying, one of the main requirements is to have a plan with a set of objectives. This is what we did, and we hope that the ECB guidelines can be ready in October. There is one single entity first, and then horizontal process throughout the European countries. At the end of the process, we shall have a full feedback. The ratio of NPL on the assets, for example, well, they said don't expect numbers when it seems that the numbers are being published. We're working to improve things. We have favorable results. From the point of view of the workout unit, the real change depends on the plans, the targets, but also specialization. If you segment your portfolio. And remember that a few years ago we had 5, 6 legal departments in the various legal entities. Now we have just one, and we have the best practices. We rationalize also the collaboration with external legal firms. We are saving a lot. We have a category of strategic staff with the best staff that we have.